To the people I protect, I am a shadow. To my own family, I am the daughter who never quite figured it out. My father has a way of saying my name at dinner tables that makes it sound like a gentle disappointment. Not cruel, just weighted. Like he's already done the math and come up short. I noticed it first when I was maybe 12, sitting across from him at the kitchen table in our house in Barrie, Ontario. Watching him describe my older sister's piano recital to our uncle with this particular brightness in his voice. Then he'd glance at me, and the brightness would kind of settle, like a lamp being dimmed. I'm 31 now. I've been a federal intelligence analyst with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service for 6 years. I carry a clearance level most people don't know exists. I've sat in rooms where decisions got made that changed things. Quietly, permanently, in ways that never made the news. I've worked files that I will carry in my chest for the rest of my life and never be able to explain to anyone I love. My family thinks I process insurance claims for a regional broker in Ottawa. I told them that when I first moved to the capital at 25, because I needed something plausible and boring, and insurance is the kind of word that makes people stop asking follow-up questions. My mother, bless her, accepted it immediately and moved on to asking whether I was eating enough vegetables. My father nodded slowly, the way he does when he's filed something away under not quite what I hoped for. My sister, Renee, she's 3 years older and married to a man named Douglas and considers this a personality, actually laughed. Insurance, she said. Okay, Mara. That was my name in her mouth. Okay, Mara. Like I was a kid who'd announced she wanted to be a veterinarian. I let it go. I had to. There is paperwork I signed, obligations I carry, things I cannot say even to the people I would die for. And I mean that literally. I almost did, once, on an operation in a city I'm not going to name. But that's not the story I'm here to tell. The story I'm here to tell starts with a phone call from my mother in the second week of October, asking if I could come home to Barrie for Renee's engagement party. Renee was marrying Douglas. They'd been together for 4 years, long enough that I had privately accepted it as inevitable, the way you accept a slow leak in a ceiling tile. Douglas is not a bad person. I want to be honest about that. He's just very confident, in a way that seems untethered from any particular achievement. He has opinions about wine and property values. And he says, at the end of the day, approximately 9 times per hour, he comes from money. Old Barrie money, which is a specific kind of money that feels the need to announce itself constantly, because it's never quite sure anyone noticed. His family, his mother, his father, his 2 brothers, who both work in the same commercial real estate firm. They were coming to the party. This was the part that made my mother's voice go slightly higher on the phone, into that register she uses when she needs everything to be perfect. It's just dinner, she said, at the Rathmore. The Rathmore is a restored heritage building in downtown Barrie that does private events. It's the kind of place where the tables have actual linen, and the waitstaff refill your water without being asked. My mother had clearly been planning this for months. I could hear it in the way she said the name. She wanted Douglas's family to see us a certain way. I said I'd be there. Of course I said I'd be there. 2 days before the party, my sister called. What are you wearing? She asked, before I'd even said hello. I was thinking the navy blazer and, no, she said. You always look like you're going to a job interview. I'm sending you something. Renee, I don't need. It's a dress. It's pretty. Just wear it, please. I don't want to explain you to his mother. I held the phone away from my face for a moment. Explain me. I put the phone back. What does that mean? It means you have this way of being in a room where it seems like you're somewhere else, like you're not really there. It makes people uncomfortable. His mother notices things. I didn't say anything to that. She wasn't entirely wrong about the somewhere else part. Professional habit, situational awareness. I'm always watching the room more than I'm in it. But that wasn't what she meant. She meant I was the kind of person who needed to be managed. The dress arrived the next afternoon. It was beige. Not a good beige, a tired beige. The color of an old receipt. It had a ruffle at the hem that looked like an afterthought. I held it up in my apartment, under the light, and thought, she sent me this on purpose. I almost didn't wear it. I stood in my closet for a long time on the evening of the party, in Ottawa, with the beige dress on the hanger, and my own clothes on either side of it. I have a dark green dress I bought in Montreal 2 years ago. It fits well. I feel like myself in it. But René's voice was in my head. I don't want to explain you to his mother. I wore the beige one. I drove up the 400 in the early evening, parked near the Rathmore, and walked in with the kind of neutrality that I've spent years cultivating. The private dining room was already half full. My mother saw me from across the room and smiled. Relieved, I thought, which stung a little, and came over to take my coat. You look lovely, she said, touching the sleeve of the dress. She recognized it. She'd seen it before I had. Douglas's parents were at the far end of the room. His mother's name was Patricia. She had the kind of posture that comes from decades of assuming people are watching, and she wore a brooch on her lapel that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His father, Gerald, I remembered from the one time I'd met him before, was tall, retired from something in finance, and had the particular stillness of a man who had never once doubted his own value. René floated over to me, glowing in a way that was genuinely beautiful. She looked happy. I'll give her that. Whatever else, she looked like a woman who had gotten what she wanted. You wore it, she said, looking at the dress. I wore it. She squeezed my arm and moved on. I found my seat and settled in. I knew how to do this. Stay quiet, be pleasant, answer questions without generating new ones. I've done more socially complicated things in hotel lobbies in foreign cities. A dinner party in Barrie was well within my capabilities. The problem started around the time the appetizers arrived. Gerald had been asking my father about his work. My father is a retired school principal, which Gerald seemed to find charming in a slightly condescending way, and then the conversation turned, as it always does, toward the children. And what do your girls do? Patricia asked my mother. My mother smiled. René, you know, she's in marketing, and she's been doing beautifully. And Mara is in insurance, my father said. Just that, insurance. With a pause before it, like he was deciding whether to say it at all. Regional broker, he added. In Ottawa, processing claims, that sort of thing. I watched Patricia's expression do the thing that polite faces do when they're rearranging expectations. A small recalibration. A tightening around the eyes that she probably didn't know she was doing. Oh, she said. That's steady work. Steady work. The words hung in the air like a smell. And then Douglas, who had been half listening from across the table, leaned over and said, with this easy casual smile, the smile of someone who has never had to be careful with their words. Mara drives around in a company sedan, doing site visits. Very glamorous. There was laughter, not cruel exactly, the kind of laughter that doesn't know it's cruel. My father chuckled. My father actually chuckled. I looked at my wine glass. I picked it up. I thought about 6 years of works, about the files I'd never be able to describe, about a night in a city I won't name, where I'd held a situation together, through 11 hours of controlled chaos and come out the other side carrying it alone. I thought about my clearance, my training, the people I'd sat with in rooms where the wrong decision would have mattered in real and irreversible ways. I thought about all of it, behind my eyes, while my father chuckled at Douglas's joke about the company sedan. I set my wine glass down. It pays the bills, I said pleasantly. The table moved on. That was the thing about being good at my job. I'd learned how to be invisible in plain sight. I'd learned how to let things pass through me that would break other people, not because I didn't feel them, but because I understood the cost of reacting. My handler, a woman named Dr. Theriault, who I'd worked with for 4 years, once told me that the most dangerous thing a person in my field can do is want to be understood. You have to make peace with operating without credit. You have to learn to be the kind of person whose significance is invisible. I'd learned that. I'd gotten very good at it. But I'm not going to pretend it doesn't cost something, sitting at a table in a beige dress, while your father laughs at a joke about your life. The dinner went on. Wine was poured. Renee and Douglas talked about the wedding venue. They were thinking a summer wedding, somewhere in Muskoka, which made Patricia visibly pleased. My mother kept glancing at me with a small apologetic look she thought I wasn't noticing. I smiled back at her each time. It was fine. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed in my bag. I had it on a specific vibration pattern for certain contacts. This pattern meant the call was routed through a secure line. I felt it against my side and kept my expression exactly where it was. I waited 60 seconds. It buzzed again. "Excuse me," I said to no one in particular, and stepped out into the hallway. The corridor outside the private dining room was quiet. Pale gold lighting, framed heritage photographs on the walls, the sound of the kitchen somewhere distant. I found a corner away from the door and answered. It was my unit supervisor. He used my last name, the way he always does when it's not a routine call. "There's a situation," he said. "Senator Whitmore is in Barrie tonight for a private event. We've had a credible threat come through in the last hour. Local RCMP is already coordinating, but we need a senior analyst on site who knows the file. How far are you from the Rathmore Hotel?" I paused. "I'm at the Rathmore," I said. "A beat. The Rathmore Heritage Dining House," I clarified. "I'm at a family event." He paused too. Then, "Can you move?" "Yes," I said. "Where do you need me?" He gave me the details. Senator Whitmore's security detail was staged on the north side of the building. 3 vehicles. The event she was attending was in the building directly adjacent. One of the Rathmore's second function rooms. A different entrance. There'd been a threat assessed as credible enough to take seriously, tied to a file I'd actually worked on 18 months ago. My unit supervisor needed someone who knew the context, who could brief the senator's detail on threat specifics without having to start from scratch. "I have access to the secure briefing from my laptop," I said. "It's in my car. Give me 8 minutes." I went back into the dining room long enough to get my bag from my chair. Renee caught my eye from across the table. I gave her the look I've given 100 sources and contacts. Calm, no urgency, everything is fine. I'm just stepping out. She turned back to Douglas. I went to my car, changed out of the beige dress, into the change of clothes I keep in a bag, in my trunk. Dark slacks, CSIS badge jacket, retrieved my laptop, and walked around to the north entrance of the building complex. What I didn't know, and what I found out later, was that the senator had decided, for reasons of her own, probably logistical, to come through the main entrance of the Rathmore Heritage Building, rather than the adjacent function room entrance. Her security detail was reconfiguring around that in real time, which meant that she walked through the main doors, past the front desk, and directly down the hallway outside the private dining room, where my family was eating dinner. Approximately 4 minutes after I'd started my briefing with her lead security agent, I was in the corridor. I had my badge clipped to my jacket. I was mid-sentence, explaining the relevant threat history to the agent beside me, when the doors opened. Senator Whitmore is a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and the particular composure of someone who has been in rooms where things mattered. She saw me immediately. We had met once before briefly, at a policy briefing in Ottawa 8 months ago. I hadn't expected her to remember. She remembered. She walked directly toward me, extending her hand, and said, clearly, in the voice of someone who is used to being heard, "Analyst Bouchard, they told me you'd be here. I read your threat assessment on the Elgin file. It was the clearest brief I've received in 2 years. I'm glad you're on this." Her security lead stepped in smoothly, and they moved on, and I went back to the briefing, and that was all. Except the door to the private dining room was not fully closed. I found out later. From my mother, on the phone the next morning. speaking in a voice I had never heard her use before. Something between shock and a kind of odd quiet. That the door had drifted open just enough. That the hallway carried sound. That Renee had been the first to hear. And had put her hand on Douglas's arm without realizing she was doing it. And that my father had pushed his chair back slightly, and that Patricia had set down her fork, and that the whole table had heard a sitting Canadian senator say my name with precision and gratitude in a government hallway while I stood there in a CSIS badged jacket. Nobody said anything for a while, my mother told me, and then your father said, very quietly. He said, "What does she do?" I wasn't there for that part. I was doing my job. I drove back to Ottawa that night after the situation was assessed and resolved. It was past midnight when I got home. I hung the beige dress on the back of my bathroom door and looked at it for a minute. Then I put it in the bag for donation. My father called the next afternoon. He's not a man who calls without a reason, and he's not a man who apologizes easily. And what he said wasn't exactly an apology. It was more like a door opening. He said my name, without the weight in it. He asked about my work, really asked, not the way you ask about something you've already categorized, but the way you ask when you realize you've been looking at something for years and still don't know what it is. I told him I worked for the federal government in a national security capacity, that I couldn't say more than that I'd never been able to say more than that. There was a long pause. I didn't know, he said. Another pause. Are you? Is it good work? Do you feel? He stopped. Started again. Are you proud of what you do? I thought about 11 hours in a city I won't name. I thought about Dr. Theriault telling me that operating without credit is the cost of doing it right. I thought about the threat file I'd closed last night, in a heritage building corridor in Barrie, while my family ate dinner 30 feet away. Yes, I said, I'm proud of it. He didn't have the language for what came after that. Neither did I, really, but something had shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, the way things shift in movies. More like the way ice goes out on Georgian Bay in the spring. You don't see it happen. You just look out one morning and the water is moving again. Renee texted me the following week. It took her 6 days, which I think was the minimum amount of time she needed to rearrange things internally before she could reach out. The text said, I didn't know either. I'm sorry about the dress. I read it twice, then I wrote back, it's okay, though I should have worn the green one. She sent a laughing emoji, then a heart. It wasn't everything. I'm not going to pretend it resolved years of dinner tables and waited silences and being the daughter who never quite figured it out. It didn't. These things don't resolve cleanly. What it did was shift something, open a door, create a small space where something different could eventually grow. I still can't tell my family what I do, not really. I still go home and answer careful questions and let things pass through me that might break other people. The work is the same. The clearance is the same. The files I carry are the same, but my father says my name differently now. And some mornings, that's enough.